Just when Netflix thought they could quietly move on from the Meghan Markle experiment, she stormed back into the spotlight with something no one saw coming. After all, the money wasted, after the flopped projects, and after months of negative press, executives were finally hoping the storm had passed. But Meghan isn't the type to fade away quietly. Instead, she decided to hijack her own press tour and drop what might be the strangest announcement of her career. During the promo for With Love, Meghan Season 2, a show already struggling to find an audience, she revealed her next big idea. And get this, it isn't a charity documentary or a Hollywood drama. Meghan wants to become a full-blown travel critic. Yes, you heard that right. Not a host, not a friendly narrator, not even a lifestyle influencer. She wants to critique entire countries. Imagine tuning into Netflix and seeing Meghan Markle stand in front of the Colosseum in Rome, not to celebrate its history, but to tell you why the pasta just didn't vibe with her. Or picture her walking through Berlin, pointing at the architecture and declaring it doesn't match her energy. That's the concept. A Duchess turned cultural Yelp reviewer. Now, here's where it gets even messier. Netflix already saw this pitch months ago. The idea wasn't just rejected, it was quietly shelved because executives thought it was bland, unmarketable, and honestly, a little bit ridiculous. But Meghan either didn't get the memo or chose to ignore it entirely. She went on stage and proudly declared this would be her next big thing, presenting herself as a global travel critic. That word critic wasn't a slip of the tongue, it's the actual way she framed it. And the moment she said it, insiders say the Netflix boardroom went into chaos. Some executives were stunned, wondering if she had just committed the company to another doomed vanity project without approval. Others were furious, pointing fingers at Ted Sarandos, the very executive who pushed to sign her in the first place. Sarandos reportedly tried to defend her, insisting they had to back her creativity. But the backlash inside the company was immediate. One insider even said the mood in the room felt like déjà vu, same circus all over again. The problem is that Netflix is already fighting battles on multiple fronts. They're trying to juggle big-budget releases, competition from Disney and Amazon, and subscriber fatigue from rising prices. The last thing they wanted was Meghan Markle suddenly rebranding herself as a travel critic and forcing the company into another round of public controversy. Yet, here they are, and this was only the beginning. Because as wild as a Duchess critiquing pasta might sound, Meghan wasn't finished with her surprises. The timing of Meghan's announcement couldn't have been worse. Inside Netflix, August was supposed to be a rebound month. Executives had carefully lined up big releases, from high-profile dramas to the long-awaited second season of Wednesday. The goal was simple: remind the world that Netflix is still the streaming giant, still capable of dominating headlines with hit after hit. But instead of glowing reviews and social media buzz for their blockbuster shows, the spotlight was yanked away by Meghan Markle and her surprise travel project. What was meant to be a low-key press tour for With Love, Meghan Season 2, something the company was quietly hoping would slip under the radar, suddenly turned into a front-page chaos. The reality is, Netflix never wanted Season 2 to be a big deal. After disappointing viewership and lukewarm reception, the plan was to let it run, close the book on the experiment, and move on. But Meghan had other ideas. She used the promotional stage not only to launch her travel critic dream, but to toss in another curveball. She's writing a brand new book. And this wasn't just any book. According to Meghan, it's going to be deeply personal, packed with never-before-heard revelations, and finally reveal the real Meghan Markle to the world. Think about that for a second. After years of interviews, documentaries, and endless media appearances, she's still promising untold truths. It's as if every time people think they've heard it all, she insists there's another hidden chapter. For Netflix, this was a nightmare scenario. They had invested millions into building her as a streaming personality, not a memoirist, and now, right as they were trying to steer attention back to their core content, Meghan effectively hijacked their press cycle to launch her own personal brand extensions. One executive reportedly described the moment as a desperation play, a last-ditch effort by Meghan to stay relevant in an industry that has already begun to move past her. Behind the polished smiles and rehearsed speeches, the executives weren't celebrating, they were seething, because they know exactly what this means. If the book sells, it could overshadow her Netflix projects, making the company look like a mere sidekick to Meghan's personal ambitions. If it doesn't sell, then Netflix looks foolish for continuing to invest in someone whose star power is slipping fast. Either way, it's a losing game. And while Meghan painted her announcements as empowering, insiders say it only deepened the divide inside the company. Some execs believe she's dragging Netflix down with her endless reinventions. Others think the company is already in too deep to back out now. But one thing was clear in the aftermath of that press tour. This wasn't the end of the circus. In fact, it was only getting messier. Because while Netflix was scrambling to put out fires, Meghan had just set the stage for the next chapter of chaos. Behind the scenes, Meghan's announcements didn't just rattle a few nerves, they triggered full-blown panic inside Netflix. What looked like a simple press tour from the outside turned into a nightmare for the company's PR and creative teams. Why? Because nobody knew this was coming. According to insiders, Meghan never cleared the travel show reveal or the book announcement with Netflix beforehand. Ted Sarandos, the executive who championed her original deal, had given her some informal permission to brainstorm future projects. But that's a far cry from standing on stage and publicly locking the company into two massive new ventures. For the PR team, it felt like an ambush. Suddenly, they were left scrambling to explain projects that didn't technically exist yet, with no press releases, no production schedules, and no official green light. Damage control went into overdrive. Meetings stretched late into the night. Staffers were reportedly working around the clock, trying to patch together talking points and prevent the story from spiraling completely out of control. But the truth is, the spin wasn't convincing anyone. Industry journalists immediately picked up on the chaos, pointing out that Netflix seemed blindsided and unprepared. And if there's one thing Wall Street hates, it's the image of a company losing control of its narrative. The internal divide at Netflix only grew sharper. On one side was Sarandos, still defending Meghan, arguing that they had to support her creative vision or risk looking disloyal. On the other side were executives like co-CEO Greg Peters, who were reportedly furious, convinced that Netflix was being dragged into another media circus against its will. Some producers even began privately distancing themselves from anything connected to Meghan. One high-ranking creative executive apparently asked to be removed from all internal threads related to her projects, saying they didn't want their name tied to what was quickly becoming a sinking ship. It was déjà vu all over again. When Netflix first signed Meghan, there had been extinct hope that her royal connections and global profile could deliver a string of hits. But years later, after Spotify had already walked away from the Sussexes, and Netflix itself had seen little return on investment, patience was running out. Meghan's surprise announcements didn't feel like bold creativity. They felt like desperation. And that's what made the fallout so toxic. This wasn't just about one show or one book. It was about Netflix's credibility. How could the biggest streaming company in the world look so out of step, being pushed around by a celebrity who seemed more interested in her personal brand than in the work? The cracks in the partnership were now impossible to ignore. And yet, the fallout didn't stop there. Because while Netflix executives were tearing each other apart behind closed doors, Meghan was painting herself in public as something entirely different, a misunderstood visionary. While Netflix executives were scrambling to contain the chaos, Meghan was doubling down on her narrative. To the public, she painted herself as a misunderstood visionary, someone brave enough to push forward with new ideas, while critics tried to tear her down. In her words, the travel show wasn't just another project, it was a chance to inspire people, to connect cultures, and to share her unique perspective with the world. The book, she insisted, would finally reveal who she truly was, beyond the tabloid headlines and the relentless criticism. On paper, that might sound inspiring, but in practice, it had the opposite effect. Instead of sympathy, Meghan's comments sparked backlash. Every time she talked about being attacked, being misunderstood, or being unfairly judged, it rubbed people the wrong way. The narrative of "they just don't get me" only fueled the perception that she was out of touch and, frankly, a little narcissistic. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Meghan was standing in front of luxury cameras, promoting international travel and promising a deeply personal memoir at a moment when the public seemed exhausted by her story. It wasn't just that people had heard it all before, it was that they were tired of hearing it at all. Her fan base, once passionate and loyal, had been shrinking steadily for years. The excitement that followed her royal wedding and the initial interviews had long since evaporated. Now, instead of curiosity, there was eye-rolling. Instead of support, there was fatigue. Social media, once buzzing with hashtags in her defense, was now filled with jokes, memes, and sharp criticisms about her endless reinvention. Even industry insiders were blunt. One Netflix executive, speaking off the record, described the situation with a brutal analogy. It's like watching someone walk into quicksand while giving a TED Talk. In other words, Meghan was sinking fast, but still trying to present herself as a thought leader. The more she tried to control the narrative, the more it slipped away from her. And that's the real danger of her current strategy. Because when someone keeps insisting they're misunderstood while ignoring how the public actually perceives them, it doesn't build sympathy, it builds distance. Meghan's reputation wasn't just fragile, it was radioactive. Every new announcement, every bold claim, every attempt to reposition herself seemed to ignite fresh waves of backlash instead of admiration. Yet, despite all of this, Meghan wasn't slowing down. If anything, she was speeding up, pushing forward with projects that many believed were doomed before they even started. But her reputation wasn't the only problem, because soon, the focus shifted to the very thing at the heart of this mess, the shows themselves. And that's where things looked even worse. If Netflix executives were hoping that the actual product might redeem Meghan's surprise announcements, those hopes were crushed almost immediately. Even before With Love, Meghan Season 2 had aired, early test screenings were painting a grim picture. The feedback from audiences wasn't just lukewarm, it was brutal. Words like hollow, self-indulgent, and even unbearable showed up in private screening reports. Instead of feeling like a heartfelt series that brought people closer to Meghan, viewers said it came across as a personal rebranding exercise. Every episode felt less like storytelling and more like an attempt to convince the world that she was a thought leader. But instead of inspiring people, it left them disconnected. One reviewer put it bluntly, "It doesn't feel like a show. It feels like a long commercial for Meghan herself." And that's the last thing Netflix wanted. The structural problems were glaring too. Episodes lacked clear direction, scenes felt stitched together, and the tone kept shifting, as if the show couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Was it lifestyle content? Was it a documentary? Was it self-help? In the end, it landed as none of the above. Even sympathetic viewers struggled to find something to hold on to. Behind the scenes, producers were growing frustrated. Some who had been hopeful during Season 1 quietly began pulling away. A few even went so far as to request removal from Meghan-related projects altogether, not wanting their names tied to something so toxic. For creatives who thrive on building successful, buzzworthy shows, With Love, Meghan was quickly becoming a career liability. And then there was Ted Sarandos as the executive most closely tied to Meghan's deal. The spotlight was shifting uncomfortably toward him. Insiders whispered that his credibility was now at stake. One failed experiment could be explained away, but two in a row. That made him look reckless, as if he was gambling Netflix's reputation on a partnership that clearly wasn't working. The fallout was so intense that a growing faction inside Netflix began arguing that Sarandos should step back from Meghan entirely. Their reasoning was simple. The more the company invested, the worse it looked. Netflix was supposed to be known for groundbreaking shows and cultural hits, not for bankrolling vanity projects that nobody asked for. And the worst part? This was just the beginning. Season 2 hadn't even officially aired yet, and already it was being overshadowed by the chaos surrounding Meghan's travel show pitch and her mysterious book announcement. Instead of salvaging her brand, the series was sinking it even further. Netflix had quietly hoped to close this chapter with dignity. Instead, they were staring at yet another PR disaster, one that was about to collide with the company's broader strategy for the year. Because while Meghan's show was flopping behind closed doors, Netflix had been gearing up for something much bigger, and Meghan's circus was about to crash straight into it. For Netflix, the Meghan Markle drama wasn't just a celebrity headache, it threatened their entire strategy. August 2025 was meant to be a victory lap. Big budget releases, marketing campaigns, and cultural buzz to justify recent subscription hikes. Instead, Meghan stole the spotlight. Her travel show pitch and surprise memoir dominated headlines, leaving Netflix's new content overlooked. Executives were furious. Headlines were sucking the oxygen out of the room, while subscriber numbers wavered and cancellations loomed. Behind the PR polish, Netflix looked less like a creative powerhouse and more like Meghan's personal stage. Every negative headline and frustrated subscriber chipped away at its reputation with viewers, investors, and Hollywood. And the travel show backlash was only the beginning. Global problems were brewing, far beyond the boardroom. Meghan's travel show was meant to be bold, but the world disagreed. Critics mocked her as the self-appointed arbiter of global culture, comparing the series to Eat, Pray, Love meets Yelp. Tourism boards quietly worried that her critiques could hurt reputations. And even former fans questioned why Meghan should be the world's travel judge. Meanwhile, her book announcement stirred its own frenzy. Rumors flew. Would she revisit royal conflicts? Spill Hollywood secrets? Publishers circled, eager for a headline-making memoir, but Netflix hadn't signed her to write a book. The danger was clear. Her memoir could overshadow or even contradict her shows. Inside Netflix, frustration grew. Meghan seemed to be using the platform to promote herself, not to create content people actually wanted. The once promising partnership now looked fragile, maybe even doomed. By now, even Meghan's closest allies knew her Netflix deal was hanging by a thread. She had projects in the pipeline, but no long-term commitment, just one-off experiments struggling to land. Her flurry of announcements, a faltering show, a risky travel concept, a tell-all memoir felt less like passion and more like survival. Industry insiders saw recycled themes: resilience, misunderstood greatness, rising above critics. Only the audience was colder, the stakes higher. Behind the scenes, Meghan's control was stifling. Writers tiptoed, producers second-guessed, and even her PR team seemed exhausted. Every move was loud but fleeting, calculated but unconvincing. In Hollywood, desperation spreads fast. Investors pull back, executives lose patience, audiences move on. Meghan's star power wasn't gone, but it was fading, and with every announcement, the cracks showed. The bigger question wasn't whether she could release another show or book it, was whether anyone would care. Fame fades piece by piece, and Meghan's next move might determine whether her brand survives or finally collapses under its own noise. Meghan's media push isn't about a show or a book, it's about survival. What started as a glittering gamble for Netflix has become overpromises, backlash, and fading public interest. Executives hoped for cultural influence, but found themselves in a circus they can't escape. Fame rarely disappears overnight. It fades in fragments until the spotlight feels more like a shadow. Critics say the cracks are showing, and every new move, whether critiquing countries or promising revelations, only widens them. Yet Meghan never quits quietly. Some call it resilience, others desperation. Either way, she forces the world to keep watching. The real question: how many chances remain? If her next projects flop, Meghan's brand might not just be struggling, it could be finished. And for Netflix, betting millions on her name, that's a risk they can no longer afford.